What's up guys, Lifting here. Within too many hours the hybrid Bloodlines Torment 1 month league is going to start, and in this video I'm going to give you 5 quick tips to do well in the race, and besides that I've also compiled 5 build guides you guys can follow if you want to. But first let me give you a few tips. Tip number 1. Set up a shop as soon as possible. The demand for items and skill gems are at its highest in the beginning of the league, since nobody has anything at that time. And that means that even common skill gems and suboptimal level gear sells pretty fast and for a good price. So do yourself the favor of setting up a shop as soon as you have something to sell. And there's a few ways you can do this, but personally I recommend using procurement. And if you're unfamiliar with procurement, then Siggy has an excellent guide on how to set it up, and I will leave a link to that guide in the description. Tip number 2. On a related note, since nobody has gear in the beginning of the league, being one of the first persons who can farm Piety or Dominus efficiently and then setting the items for sale will leave you with a ton of buyers. Try to think about it this way: you can farm Piety or Dominus and provide gear. The people who haven't yet reached that point themselves want to farm Piety, Dominus or progress into maps, and in order to do that many of them need the gear that you can provide. So being one of the first ones who can farm these guys and get all of those rare items can yield a huge profit. And if possible, then stack a small amount of increased item rarity on your gear while doing this for maximum efficiency. And of course progress into maps later on when you feel like the experience is starting to become suboptimal. Now tip number 3, fix your resistances. I know this is very basic, but it cannot be said enough. Lacking specific elemental resistances as you progress into merciless difficulty can and will in most cases get you killed. Check the vendors for ruby, topaz and sapphire rings and use a few transmute and alteration orbs if necessary to get the required rolls. I also recommend picking up the purity of fire, cold and lightning skill gems along with purity of elements, and then use them when necessary throughout your adventure in rare class. And yeah guys, even if it means you have to disable your damage auras or heralds, remember a dead exile doesn't deal a lot of damage. Tip number 4. Whether you're playing as a spellcaster or attack based, you should use the +1 to fire, cold or lightning skill gems or the increased physical damage vendor recipe to improve your character's offensive capabilities in the beginning of the race. And to get a +1 to level of either fire, cold or lightning skill gem, you need to trade the vendor a magical scepter, wand or dagger along with an alteration orb and either a ruby, sapphire, topaz ring depending on which type of element you want boosted. And you probably already know this, but ruby gives +1 to fire, sapphire +1 to cold and topaz +1 to lightning. For the increased physical damage recipe you need a rustic sash, a blacksmith's whetstone and the weapon you wish to upgrade. And the higher rarity of the sash determines how good the increased physical damage roll is going to be. So basically a rare rustic sash will provide better results than a normal or magical one. And now for the last tip, tip number 5. Start the league by choosing a build that is relatively cheap and scales well without expensive gear. I cannot say this enough. You do not want to create a build that requires expensive or rare unique items in the beginning of the league, as you first of all won't have the currency to buy it, and secondly, you may also risk that the item is not even for sale until late in the league. And needless to say, if that happens, you'll be running around with a suboptimal build for a long while, and if your plans is to do well in the race, then that obviously won't work, and it isn't a lot of fun either. Instead, I suggest going for builds that scales easily on their own, and a typical example of these are spellcasters, trappers, totem dudes, summoners, and to some extent elemental attack-based builds such as the boss saw or elemental kinetic blast mortars. One thing to note about summoners is that they can be quite the pain to level in the beginning, but yeah. And on that note, remember I said in the beginning of the video that I had compiled 5 build guides for you to follow in case you still hadn't decided for a build for the race? Well, here it is. In this document I have 5 builds that are all very good choices for the 1 month race. The only build that requires a good weapon is the crit tornado shot puncture ranger. However, it should be possible to get that weapon without too much trouble. And besides that, we have the typical but very strong arc witch build, the tornado shot ranger as I just talked about, the dual flame totem blood magic marauder, a powerhouse zombie spectre summoner, and lastly a crit ball lightning witch or shadow build. And I've played all of these builds and I've had great success with them. The Flame Totem Summoner and Ball Lightning character has a video guide attached to them, and I highly suggest you check them out if you're going with those builds. Besides that, you have everything you need to know to get started, such as the skill gem setups, the skill trees, unique item suggestions, and please note here that these unique items are not required but instead optional suggestions. And lastly, I have written a few notes below that I suggest you read as well. If you want to check the document, simply click the description right down below and there you'll find it. And yeah, that's about it, guys. I wish you the best of luck in the upcoming 1 month league. If you have any question about any of the builds, feel free to ask them below. I would also like to know which league you will be playing in personally. And remember, if you want to see more Path of Exile content, remember to hit the subscribe button below. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?